So now that we have our edit in place for editing our profile, I'm going to make a few quick changes to the view part here, and then we'll get to the post back piece. So going back in here, this will be edit user profile. Go ahead and get rid of those H4s. I know they like to put them in there. I'm going to scroll down here to the password and password confirm. So the template uses the editor 4 by default. I'm going to change that to be password 4 on both the password and password confirm. Now there's this new HTML attributes. We want to back out the new curly bracket HTML attributes equals, because that's not a thing for password 4, and then drop the extra curly bracket on the end. And this is just something from experience. I know how to jump in and do this. You're welcome to follow this guidance or kind of discover it on your own. But basically, password 4 does not use it has an HTML attribute, but it's more of a absolute. It's not an optional thing like we were seeing before with the way that the editor 4 structures it. So those are some basic changes. So let's jump to our view and just do a quick refresh. All right, so now it says edit user profile. We've got that information all in there, username, and then if we type into the password fields, they are protected. Great. So let's get the save button working. So let's jump back into Visual Studio. We want to go back to our account controller, and we'll collapse that. And let's kind of talk through what does an edit look like and what do we need to do with an edit. To do an edit, there's a series of steps. First thing is validate the model, which means that we'll probably need to decorate our view model. And then once we do that, we will want to check for a password change. And if there is a password change, then we need to compare password with password confirm. And then we need to get our user from the database. Set/update values, that's not values, from the view model, and then save changes. All right, so first thing I always like to do is if model state.is valid, I'm going to say if it's not valid, then I'm going to return the view with the view model, so that with the view is at least populated already. All right, now in order to make sure that works, we need to jump back to our view model. And if you're wondering what I just did there is I clicked on the class or the data type, and then on your keyboard you can hit F12. If you're on a Mac, you hit function F12, and that'll actually jump you straight to the class. So that way you don't always have to jump back to the Solution Explorer. You can just F12 around and jump between your classes. All right, so everything here except for the password needs to be required. Now we don't have the correct using statement for data annotation, so I'll bring that in. Now I need to put that required on all of our required fields. Now I see a lot of you will probably go and highlight this. Some of you know you can double click. In Visual Studio you can put your cursor on a line and do a Control-C, and it will actually copy the entire line. And since that's the only thing on the line, we can just copy that. You can come in front of a line and do a Control-V, and it'll actually paste that line in and drop down one. So we need to just paste. I'm going to skip gender as well because, well, I need to go back and fix that. I'm actually going to move it down here. So gender and the passwords are not required. They're optional fields for this view. This is another good point about needing different view models. I know there was a question in the Slack this week around could we just share the same view model? And while this view model's properties look very similar, the required versus optional fields are different. So being able to negotiate and juggle which ones are required versus which ones are optional and utilizing the attribute and the model state.is valid, you can't do that as successfully if you're sharing view models, because while the password is optional on the edit, it is required on the create. So then that leaves you to having to write code, writing if statements in your action to make sure that you're checking if they are required, that they're actually getting set. So you lose a little bit of functionality in the sense that you have to write that functionality yourself. You can still end up getting the same result, but it's on your shoulders to write that code. All right, so we have our edit view model in place. So I'll go ahead and Next step will be check for password. So if the edit VM, edit VM dot password, I'm actually going to use my string utility. String dot is null or white space. And we want to say if. So if the string is not null or white space, so that's what the exclamation mark at the end there is, then we need to do the password compare. And then we can say if the edit VM dot password equal, or if it does not equal edit VM dot confirm password confirm, then we need to do model state dot add model error password and password confirm must match. So return the view with the edit view model. Okay, so now let's grab our user out of the database. So we'll do our using statement, our context, and then the first thing we need to do is get our DTO. So user DTO equals context dot users dot first or default. Actually, we can use find in this case because we'll have an ID. We can say edit VM dot ID. And if the user DTO equals null, now we'll return content of invalid user ID. So now we need to do our setter update. So here, what happens here is that the user DTO is actually acting as a proxy. It's tracking changes that are made and which properties are changed. So when we call save changes on our context at the end, it's actually going to capture those changes and generate the necessary update statement just to update the properties that we changed. So we're going to do user DTO dot first name equals edit VM dot first name. And really the best solution here is just to go through each one of our properties and copy them over. Date modified, I'm going to set to date time dot now. So because we're making changes to the user, obviously. So user DTO dot email address equals edit VM dot email address semicolon user DTO dot last name equals edit VM dot last name. We actually need to check if we need to change the password, so we'll say username equals edit VM dot username, and then let's put a boolean all the way back up here, and we'll say these are variables. Bool needs password reset, and we'll set that to false by default. And then if this is, we'll do an else here. So we'll say if the password is not white space and these match, then we'll set this to true. And then we can say here if needs password reset, user DTO dot password equals edit VM dot password. And the last step is to make sure you always do this, context.save changes. I've seen a lot of students miss the save changes part. They go through and they update their DTO, get everything set. They get very excited that they wrote their code, they run it, they go to do the post back, and they forgot to call save changes, which while they updated the DTO doesn't actually call the commit to save the changes to the database. So without save changes, all your work is for naught. So we saved our changes. And then let's just, instead of returning a view, let's return back to the user profile. So redirect to action, and we'll go back to user profile. All right, so let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. All right, so if we can click on our profile link, brings us to our profile. We'll click edit. And just for fun, I'm going to go ahead and change my profile information. We'll go ahead and hit save. I get back invalid username. And I'm getting back invalid username because I'm getting redirected to my user profile, but I changed my username. So the user that I'm logged in as no longer exists because I changed my username. So let me log out and let me log in with my new username. And that worked. So there's my profile. That was not something I had considered. So change my username. That caused a little bit of an issue there. So let's try to make some other changes without changing my username and make sure that our logic works. So I'm going to leave my username as Steve J for now, and hit save. And there we go. So that worked successfully. That updated. So let's go ahead and make a username and password change. And maybe we need to incorporate some logic into this to say when a username change occurs or a password change occurs, you must log back in. So we'll make it pass2. And this was going to give us the invalid username error. And we say no for that. And let's go ahead and jump back to the home page, log out, and use my username. I'm going to type in my old password first. So I got invalid username and password. That's good. And type in my new password, and I'm in. So that's good to see. So let's go back and make a few quick adjustments to the flow of our application. So let's start off with, so we grab our user DTO. So let's check if there's a username change. Check for username change. And we'll say if the user DTO.username does not equal the edit VM.username, then we have username has changed. We'll set that to true. Now that's a variable I haven't declared yet. So let's go back up here under variables at the very top, and we'll say Boolean username has changed, and we'll set that to false as well. So we're capturing if our username has changed. And then if that's the case, we can also move this line of code in here. So just kind of keep those logical units together. So now we get down here to our redirect, and we need to say if username has changed, or we needed a password reset, we should return and redirect to an action. We're actually going to redirect to log out. Else, we'll return to the user profile. Now we're redirecting to logout because we need to actually say, hey, you changed your username and password, we need you to log in again. Now if we need to push that type of a message, we can actually do that using the view bag. We can say logout message. After a username or password change, please log in with the new credentials. So that'll be our message. And then we can use this view bag on our logout. Actually, we'll use it on our login view. So what I'm doing is I'm setting up a message in my view bag called logout message, and I want to actually capture that on the login view. And what I can do here is I can say if viewbag.logoutMessage is not equal null. I'm going to put a div here, and I'm going to use one of my Bootstrap, maybe, classes, alert warning, and I'm going to jazz this up a little bit with a Glyphy icon, and then I can say at viewbag.logoutMessage. So go ahead and save that. So I've made some changes, so I'm going to do a full build again. We'll jump back here and refresh. And while that refresh is happening, I just want to note here that, so I did viewbag, I did an if statement saying if the viewbag.logoutMessage is not equal null. And the reason for that is that I don't want to always put that alert up there. I only want to use it if there's a logout message. Alright, so my refresh is complete, so let's jump back in here again and edit my profile. And this time I'll do Bill Gates at hotmail.com. So Billy G. I'm going to reset my password back to password as well. So I'll hit save. So I'm back at login, and why did that not make it through? That did not make it through because I redirected to log out, which then redirected to log in, and the viewbag data does not persist the jump. That's the issue. So there's actually another storage type that we can use instead of using the viewbag. It's called temp data. And this can be called, so you use it like a dictionary, so temp data, and then in square brackets you put the name of your message. So let's try it with temp data this time. So we'll do temp data here and temp data there. All right, so let's save those changes, rebuild. Let's try one more time. So we will log in. Oh no, now I am my default password. All right, so now my user shows up as Bill Gates. I'll click on that. I'll go back to edit, and we'll set it back to the defaults, or my settings. We'll change that, and let's click save and see what happens. Excellent. So we now got that message that says after a username or password change, please log in with the new credentials. So if I log in again, I'm me again. So I've now logged in. I've modified my layout for my application. I have a partial view showing my name here and the ability to log out. I can click here, see my user profile. I can even edit that profile. And if I decide to change my username or password, I'm now handling it correctly instead of giving myself a big error. So now I can log out successfully. I'm ready for another user.